How you doing? This is Sean McVeigh with Sean's Outdoor Adventures, and have you ever wondered what the impact of draw length is on the speed of a bow? Well, I sure have. I know there's an impact, but I always wondered what would happen if I shot a bow at 31-inch draw, 30, 29, 28, 27-inch draw with the same exact arrow and tested the speed of each. Well, that's what I did today. And for our test bows, I used the PSC Evolve 35 and the BowTech Range 7, and I want to say thank you to both companies, PSC and BowTech. They were generous enough to give me these bows. And another reason why I chose these bows, obviously, for the test is they have the ability to adjust the draw length right on the cam. You don't have to swap out the cam, you don't have to swap out a module. So it was very convenient. So thank you again to PSC, thank you again to BowTech. I kind of ascribe to I want to be friends of everybody. I don't necessarily want to be sponsored by a particular brand at this point in time. I like being that way. I feel free. So I can just say thank you to these companies and share the data with you. Before I go over the findings, I do want to say a few observations I made while doing the test. For changing the draw length for the PSC Evolve, it's just a matter of turning two screws and then shifting sort of a module in here. It rotates and there's a letter that corresponds with the draw length. It was super duper easy and it maintained the same draw weight no matter what draw length I put it on. When I did the BowTech, it's still fairly easy. It's very easy to change the draw length. It's just a little more involved. You loosen two screws on the one side, change the dial, and then on the other side, you move the draw stop peg. So you're essentially manipulating three screws instead of two. One observation I did make with the BowTech is at certain draw lengths, the draw weight went out from where it had been. And also the timing went out a little bit on some of the settings, which surprised me a little bit. Ultimately, I had to adjust the draw weight a little bit to compensate to get it back to where I was. And the biggest difference came at the very short draw length, the very last one I did. When I hit 26-inch draw length, the poundage dropped out the bottom. It dropped almost 5 pounds just from changing the draw length. So that surprised me. And of course, those changes come from is with the flip disc technology that's currently used by BowTech, where you can go from comfort setting to performance setting. That changes the radicalness of the draw cycle or the smoothness, however you want to look at it. I did all this on the comfort setting, but because of the design of that has to be playing into what causes the variation in the draw weight. I will also say for both bows that it wasn't a precise 1-inch increment change from one draw stop length to the next. So it's supposed to be 1 inch, but there were some variations, and I'll talk about those as I go through the data. So let's take a look at the data. And again, special thanks to these companies for letting me have these bows. All right, so now I'm going to go over the data, and I will say that there were some variations in the bows that was causing some variations in the data that I was not hoping to see. I was hoping to see an equivalent, let's say 10 foot per second difference per inch of draw length every time we drop down. That didn't happen. However, there were some variations that were taking place that contributed to this inconsistency. And one of the clearest ones was when I would put the bow on the draw board, it wasn't an exact inch of draw length that was coming off each time, even though I was going the 1 inch. Sometimes it was a bit more than an inch, sometimes it was a bit less. So looking at the BowTech, I went from 31-inch draw down to 30, but then from 30 down to 29, the poundage of the bow went up from 65.3 pounds up to 65.8 pounds. So a half of a pound more, and that's going to change your readings. So then I was tinkering with the limb bolts to try to get the poundage back to 65.3, which was where the other shots were at. And I got it close, but it took a bunch of tinkering. And also, it was at 29 inch, it was a little bit under the 29 inch draw mark. So that you're losing speed there by having it underneath 29 inches. Then when I dropped it to 28 inch draw, it was a hair over 28 inches. So you're gaining extra speed there. Dropping it down to 27 inch draw length, I lost another 0.2 pounds, and it was a hair under 27 inch draw length. When I went down to 26, it actually read 25.5 pounds, just about, and I lost 5 pounds in draw weight. So pumping the draw weight back up and also being, below actual 26, I was concerned about what that would do. So looking at the results here, at 31 inch draw, we had 336 feet per second. At 30 inch draw, we had 323 feet per second. That's a 13 foot per second difference. Now, you'll recall that when I went to 29 inch, things got a little haywire with the poundage and the draw length. So it was a little under 29, and I was manipulating the poundage to try to get it back to 65.3. I got it close, but it came in at 305 feet per second, an 18 foot per second difference. Then when I went to 28 inch draw, as I said, it actually came in a hair over the 28 inch draw. So you're gaining speed, and it came in at 299 feet per second, and we see there was only a 6 foot per second difference. And that's because you're not actually, so I was a hair under 29 inches, and now I was a hair over 28. So I'm not going off a full inch there. And so that doesn't give us the full impact. Now dropping down to 27 inch draw, it was a hair under 27 inch. So it actually gave us a little bit more in the than 1 inch. And it was a 17 foot per second difference in speed. So it was 282 feet per second. So if those numbers were hitting right on the 1 inch mark, we would have had more consistent, spacing in the data. Then when I dropped it down to 26 inch, it actually read below that. And I did make sure that I was putting the draw stop pegs at the right settings. I made sure I put the flip disc in the right spot for that draw length, but they were still reading a little bit inaccurately as far as 1 exact inch for whatever reason. And even though it was reading 25.5, closer to 25.5 inch draw length, it was only a 9 foot per second difference in speed from the 27. Now looking over at the PSC, I shot it at the 31 inch draw. It came in at 335 feet per second. At 30 inch, it came in at 312, which is a 23 foot per second difference. Now, when I bumped it down to 29 inch draw, it came in a hair under 29. So now you're losing more than an inch, just over a little more than an inch. And it came in at 299 feet per second, which was a 13 foot per second difference. And then again, when I went to 28 inch, it was almost equivalent under, just a hair under 28 inches of draw. And it came in at 288 feet per second. That was 11 foot per second difference. And then at the 27, now this was a little bit weird. I shot probably 10 to 12 shots at 27 inches. And they were coming in all over the place. I recorded 279, 286, and 284. But I was having some come in at 275, some coming in at 286. So there was like a 10 foot per second difference, and I kept shooting it and shooting it and shooting it. Maybe the battery was starting to go in the chronograph, because this just wasn't making sense to me. But ultimately, it resulted in a 5 foot per second difference from 28 to 27 inch draw. I am a little disappointed with the results, and I'm sure that those of you who are watching are like, man, I wanted more consistent results as well. In case you're wondering, I checked and double checked to make sure I was putting these on the correct draw length setting. So that was definitely on. We were just getting variations that I didn't necessarily expect. What you can expect is that you're going to lose some speed as you go down in draw length. However, to be able to say, oh, it's going to be 10 feet per second or it's going to be 5 feet per second, you really can't do that And I mean, it's also going to depend on the brand of the bow. And if any other companies send me bows, I mean, some bows, you have to have different draw length modules in order to do this. So they would have to send me the draw mods as well if they wanted me to do this with their bow. But I'm very open to that. Like I said, I'm a friend of everybody. I'm not playing any special sides. I'm grateful to every company that does share their products with me. So my encouragement to you is if you have a particular bow in mind that you would like to shoot and you're wondering what speed is it going to be, it's hard to say exactly. You'll have to go out, test it out, and even shoot it through a chronograph if the place where you're testing it out has one. Also keep in mind that typically speaking, when you see the ratings for the speed of a bow, generally it's based off of the IBO of 5 grains per pound, 70-pound draw weight, 30-inch draw length. That's a general thing. Some manufacturers don't go by that. A lot of them do. And so what I did today is I shot the bows at 65 pounds, 5 grain per pound arrow. So it was a 325 grain arrow to give you that 5 grains per pound. Another thing to consider is even if you put the bow on the particular draw length you're expecting or wanting, let's say 29-inch draw, you might need to do a little tweaking to get it exactly at 29, depending on the circumstances, depending on if there's ever been any string or cable stretching of any type at all. Just so you know, when you go to get a bow and you're working with the shop, let's say the bow is sitting on the shelf at 30-inch draw and you're like, hey, I need it at 27. They might put it at the 27-inch draw length, setting, but you might need to do a little tweaking, like put a little twist in this cable, take a little twist out of the string or whatever, just if you want it at exactly 27. It may end up being that way. And I'm just telling you that just because there may be some fine tuning that might need to go into getting the bow fit just to you. And I thank you for tuning in. Until next time, take care and God bless.